Hi, Narinder. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to start by giving you a brief introduction, and then I'll let you kind of do your own version. So you do tons of stuff. This is the list that I've compiled, and it might not be exhaustive, but I know you to be a death midwife, death care activist and educator, numinous communicator, intuitive counselor, and conceptual artist in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So maybe we can start with the death midwife title. Why did you choose that title?
Well, those are lots of titles, aren't they? And it all kind of just falls under Narinder. Why did I choose death midwife? I actually, when I was in my 20s, one of a spiritual teacher that I had said to me, did you know that long, long ago, midwives were called for the coming and the going of souls?
Hmm.
And that was the first time I had ever heard about death midwifery. And that was the seed that was planted. I think I was like 22, 23. That was a seed that was planted that grew to be my death midwifery. I like to use the word midwifery in a non-gendered way. And I like even to use the word midwife in a non-gendered way, because midwife to me is a verb, is an action, midwifing. And also I like to use the title midwife because to me it is a connection to the ancestors who were midwifing their own, who were being born and dying. And so that's another reason why I use it.
So is that that sort of ancestral connection with those being born and those dying? Is that what that verb means to you, the midwife verb?
Midwifing to me is almost it's almost synonymous to me with like psychopumping. So midwifing to me is being with someone as they're transitioning from one thing to the next, whether that's death, whether that's an ego death, whether that's the loss of a job, whether that's even midwifing society, um, being with people as they're going through the transition that we're going through right now in our society from the old paradigm to the new paradigm.
That feels super inclusive and much wider than a physical body death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I would say that is my personal guide, like soul job is to midwife society. I think that I've probably been doing that in some capacity since I was a kid,
Mm.
challenging people by calling out the truth,
Mm.
and wanting to be in relation with people, in a soulful relationship with people, and places and animals rather than a surface relationship or a surface conversation. So yeah, I've probably been midwifing for a very long time.
Yeah, I can sort of feel into the very honest, raw texture of that. Like I heard you on another podcast talking about how you had gotten scolded for speaking cavalierly about your grandmother's death.
Very good, Jane. Yeah, very good research. That's a true story.
Yeah, I think that I feel that when I get into spaces with a lot of death workers, I think I really feel that as a commonality, is that sort of like reverence or strong pull towards truth.
Yes, 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 because death is the ultimate truth.
Mm.
And we are, as death workers, I think we're always aiming to be with the truth. And when we're in the room where there is a death, we can't deny that we're in the room with the ultimate truth. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think death workers, when they come together and they meet each other, and they can just speak freely about almost anything, they find that they weren't that strange all along.
Yeah.
You were strange, but you find the other strange people.
Yeah. I have heard you talk in a few places about mother death, I think is the name that I've heard you use. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your relationship with mother death and how, I would say how you came into that relationship, but maybe there's like an element of there's the relationship and then there's the conscious awareness of the relationship. So maybe how you consciously became aware of that relationship and then how that relationship has sort of developed over time.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give you the backstory. So I was my soul incarnated into a very religious home. I think my soul has a very strong connection with where it came from, almost like it would rather be there than here a lot. So it's very connected in with something like God. And even as a child, I was praying and praising and connecting in with God. And I was in a home where it was a Christian, fundamentalist Christian. So as a child, the name put on that feeling and that relationship I had was God, and it was very masculine and patriarchal, right? And then when I left home and I went to college, I let go of all of that, because I needed to break away from the Christianity, and I quickly drowned as a mystic. And needed to find that relationship again. Through Kundalini yoga and meditation, I discovered Sikhism. And in Sikhi, God is called truth. Satnam, truth is the name. And so, I could totally resonate with that. And so I latched onto that, because I was like, I needed a name for this relationship that I had. Universe wasn't right for me. Even the word source, which I used earlier, wasn't exactly right. Spirit wasn't right. And then that relationship moved into more of my needing to find the nourishing, comforting, healing, holding, motherly energy of God, which I hadn't had ever. And I don't remember there being a moment where it was like, hey, I'm gonna latch on to mother. It was just like I needed that energy, and that energy came. And I found I could connect with this really true motherly essence, not just in prayer or meditation, but through playing, through going out to the countryside and getting lost and being with the animals, and in the actual third dimensional spaces, I was really connecting in. Well, then I started studying Dr. Marion Owen, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and learning that the mother, the great mother, that great mother energy, not God in a dress, not goddess, God in a dress, but just that great, mother energy was in mother matter. And then things got turned up and got really, really fun for me, because I was seeing God in the third dimension, not just God as in this subtle energy that I can feel so strongly, but I could feel that moving in closer. I could feel that goddess energy in what I was seeing. Serendipity, a lot of serendipity. The Holy Mother, to me, loves to play with her children and sending them notes and symbols and signs. And that, that's it. I'm hooked. Let's play, right? So, and then with my death work, I just feel, I feel that the Holy Mother is without a face, without a face, without a name, without culture, with any, she's way above all of that, all of these specific things. But she will come through sometimes in different personifications for different situations. Like sometimes she'll appear as Mother Mary, sometimes she'll appear as Hecate, sometimes she'll appear as name it, right? And to me, for me, very strongly, she is the Holy Mother of Death. So she comes through. She is she creates, she nourishes, she comforts, and also she takes us away. And so my boss, I like to joke around and say she's my boss, but there's truth in the joke. But my boss is the Holy Mother of Death. That was a long answer, but I hope there was something good in there.
Oh yeah, I love the phases of the story and the way that it sort of like builds and iterates. And I also like, I'm a body worker, I'm a very somatic person, and I just feel so much in my body and like so much energetic stuff as you're talking about that. It really feels to me like you're speaking from that connection, and it's like palpable for me, and I really appreciate that. Could you talk a little bit about having her as a boss and what that's like?
Yeah. So, so of course I have an altar, right? We have altars and a living, breathing thing, right? Not a table with decorations. And I've got a specific spot for her on my altar, and I will often. It's almost like I'm going to the office, and I'll go to my altar and I'll have my ritual there with her. And sometimes it's as quick as me saying, like, hey boss, hey ma, if you need me, call me today. And she'll say crazy things. Like, I need you to, a couple weeks ago, no, months ago, probably a couple months ago, she said, I need you to go to the stone. I was like, what the heck is that? Go to the stone. Well, it was, go to this big rock mountain here in Atlanta and go hiking up the mountain. And then I was singing songs to the Holy Mother there. And then I found this letter someone had written, and it was all from like the Holy Mother. It was just really, really magical. Stuff like that. And then she'll come to me sometimes and she'll say, I need you just to sit and be quiet. I need you to draw. I'm working on something for you, or she'll start to send me signs. Work is coming. You need to rest. There's like this guidance that I hear from her. Or I'll say, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go back to school? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to teach here? What do you want me to do? And she'll just say, just let me do it. Let me bring it to you. Just hold on. So yeah.
And so when you mentioned Hecate earlier, for example, when you're feeling into connections with different spirits and energies, is that what you're saying, that all sort of feels like the same Mother Death showing up in different forms?
Well, gosh, yeah. I mean, we're gonna get real meta here. yeah, so to me, like to make a visual, there's the nameless, faceless, colorless mother, the mother energy. And that energy will come down through different personifications, right? Like I said earlier. If she's coming down through, let's say, Mother Mary, Mother Mary is known for her unconditional love, right? But if I'm working with the Holy Mother and through, the Holy Mother of Death and Mother Mary, and they're starting to blend together like watercolors here, right? Then it's like the vibration of the death work is this very loving, very visual thinker, but very loving, very pastel, unconditional love, death and dying vibration, right? And then you can have Holy Mother of Death coming through, and she's wanting to work with Hecate. And those two are blended. These are kind of my top two, Mother Mary and Hecate. And then you've got Hecate, blending in with that energy. And so the death work takes on a form of activism for the people who have been forgotten, right? Which is a lot of my work, is advocating for, I don't say it all the time, but lower income families, lower income individuals in death and dying spaces. So that to me has that energy, like the Hecate energy of the Holy Mother of Death. And sometimes it's just, the Holy Mother of Death to me is just a dark face. I mean, there's not a dark face, not even a face, just a void. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. That's really helpful. Thanks for that image. Maybe in a similar vein, we could talk about the phrase pan-death experience, which I've heard you use. It feels like you've already touched into some of what you mean by that, which is like that death is much wider than, the death of a physical body. But I'm curious what you mean when you describe working with somebody through the pan-death experience.
What do you think it means? Am I allowed to do that on a podcast?
Oh yeah, flip the script. I guess I could feel into what I assume you mean, or feel into what it would mean for me. Or maybe I'll try to do some combination of both. I sort of had the image of like a human portal when you were talking about yourself earlier. It's sort of like wherever somebody is trying to go, you can sort of help them get there. Which can get so subtle and granular and cellular, right? Which at that point, words sort of fail, and it's just a presence and an energy and a belief in the possibility, that sort of thing. So in some ways, it's just like being yourself and shining and being open to helping people go where they want and need to go. If we zoom in a little bit more on the like physical death, it's maybe the moments in the months leading up, if there's awareness that it's coming, and then moments in the months immediately after, when you might still be in contact with the loved ones, and sort of like the really wide range of support that's involved in that time period, and all of the ways that can look, and all of the different people that there are to be supported. Yeah, I think you touched really nicely on all the types of deaths earlier. I love that you mentioned psychopomp work, which I'm just tuning into, and actually had a feeling like, let's see, I think it was last week, I was like, I think today is the day I'm like officially a psychopomp, or like I already was, but it's like the day that I'm like accepting that I am. So in a way that a lot of people maybe might not recognize, still like helping souls and beings transition and get to where they want to go and are trying to go. Yeah.
I think you nailed it. Yeah. I love that you put the pan death experience in the two, like the ethereal and then more like the job.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically you said it. It's just being there for all the deaths. I think about when a person has a baby and if it's a woman identified person and they're a mother and they have a baby, what the death that she is experiencing when she has just given birth, the death to her time, the death to her identity, that identity that she had, all those types of things. And so I think a lot of death workers, you most likely and me, would be available to help midwife someone, a mother, through that death. So pan death is like, it is you said it, it's all of the deaths, and death touches everything. And over the course of our life, from the moment we're born until the time we take our last breath, we're just like doing all these little deaths until we have our great one. So yeah, you said it all. And just to like, dot the I and cross the T, when I'm talking to clients or when I put it on my website, and I'm there for the pan death experience, you said it. It's when I have death anxiety. I'm totally healthy. I'm perfectly healthy, but I have death anxiety and I'm 42. I'm there for that all the way through terminal illness, death, after loss, grief care, and beyond.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the expression. I hadn't heard that before, so I feel like I'm gonna incorporate that into my lexicon.
Do it.
You talked a little bit about some of your activism work and your work as an educator. What do you wish that more people in America knew about death, dying, death care?
Yeah. If I could, say it through a megaphone and everyone in this country would hear it immediately, I think I think honestly what I would say is not to limit our death care to American medicine and to not limit our death care to the funeral status quo. And, I think if I could say, death is sacred every single time, even if it is a murder by police officers, that is heartbreaking, or a mass shooting. Those things are heartbreaking. And those deaths are sacred too. So I think those two things. I think I would say don't limit our death care. If we know that death is coming, don't limit the death care to American medicine and the funeral industry status quo. Don't limit it there. Expand, find out, make it holistic. And also, I would want everyone to know every death is sacred. And if everybody understood that, death is sacred, which to some people we're kind of like, well, duh, right? But it's alarming how many people can be around death and dying and there's zero sanctity. It's alarming. So we live in an echo chamber, right? Of course it is. Of course it's sacred, but we're still taking dead bodies down to the basement and out the back door of hospitals to put them in hearses, the same place where we take out the trash. So yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody thought, if everybody understood this is a sacred moment, then we'd have to shift and move some of the cultural norms that we have around death care.
Yeah.
Which everybody else, don't limit your death care to American medicine.
Beautiful. This makes me think of so I follow you on Instagram. That's how I first found you and found out about you, found out about your work, and I love your content there. Something that I see you talk about in various ways is like the moments immediately after the death. I think today that you had a post about just what it's like to be there and sort of what you touch into when you're with somebody right in that transition. Another time recently, you posted a picture of your father right after he transitioned, and in an effort, I think, to normalize that a little bit. I was wondering if we could just, yeah, it feels good just to even maybe talk about those moments a little bit and talk about them in some detail. And I would just love to hear, like, I think also a lot of people don't know what to do in that situation with their loved one. What, you know, how long they should keep the body, what they would want, what they might want to do with the body. And yeah, maybe we could talk a little bit about those moments and maybe favorite rituals that you have for that time or how that time is meaningful for you.
Yeah. Well, the protocol for if someone dies and they're on hospice, if you Google search, uh, what do you do after your loved one dies? The first thing that's going to come up in bold letters is it's going to say, call the hospice as soon as possible. There's a misunderstanding. It's a common misunderstanding that after our loved one dies, whether they're in the hospital or that they died home, that the body somehow becomes a contaminant, that the body somehow becomes dirty, and it's rushed away, and that's it, that's not the case. Now, sometimes, there's diseases and there's wounds and, like even the pandemic, the COVID is, you wouldn't want to be around a body that had died from that. But for the most part, if someone is dying from, let's say, cancer or congestive heart failure, their body doesn't suddenly become dirty after they've died. There's no reason to rush the after death process. And I have a theory that our grief is well, obviously our grief is broken here in our culture, right? Our grief is broken. And my theory is that it breaks right after death when the body is rushed away and the person does not have the time that they need to take to get into a real solid embodied understanding of that body that is before them. And sometimes that can take an hour, and they'll click and they'll go, okay, I'm ready. Sometimes it takes 8 hours. Sometimes that can take 24 hours. Sometimes that can take 2 days. And so I educate, and I want all of my apprentices to educate, and I want everyone to educate, and neighbors hear the news and educate. Don't rush the after death process. I would say, when for midwives, death midwives, when there's a death, we make tea. And I want that to like sink into my apprentices' brains. When there's a death, we make tea, meaning we stop, we go make tea, everything slows down. And rituals around that time, well, it depends on who you're with, right? And what that family needs and what their rituals would be. If the door is open for me to mark these occasions, I love to have a vigiling candle. So when I see that we are 2 days away from death, day away from death, I will bring in a tall candle. I have one burning on the table behind me, but I'll bring in a tall candle and mark the occasion that the door is open, your loved one is about to leave, and with the flowers out, a photograph, light the candle, music, just set that very sacred space around that transition. And then after the person has left their body, I go make tea while the family is there processing however they may, whether that's stepping outside to puff on their cigar or wailing over the body. However they're processing, but I'm there to guard and help to really slow down that after loss process, and then also just really guard the room, right? Guard this sacred space. The veil is wide open. The gate is wide open. The door is wide open, whatever we want to say. Okay. And I don't say these things if I have clients that are atheists, I'm not saying these things. That can be felt in my presence. The door is wide open in the room where there is a death happening. And so why not get into that quiet space and feel held by the ancestors or angels or, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about what it means for you when you say, I think you said sort of guarding or protecting the room and the sacred space?
In what way? Do you have a specific idea, Jane?
Is there like a specific action that you're taking and that sort of like guarding and protecting? Is it more of a like general energy that you're holding and doing through things like making tea, or is it yeah, I guess I'm wondering if you're talking about particular energies and spirits and things, or a more general sense.
Yeah, I think so. So let's say I'm with a family as a death midwife. They're not my family. I'm not, I would stand energetically, I'm standing beside the door. So I wouldn't want to be, hosting spirits and hosting ancestors that aren't mine. I'm standing beside the door. But I think even just having, as like just having the air of this is a sacred moment is enough to guard the door. Now, guard meaning like, let's say a neighbor comes knocking on the door, right? I heard my dog's barking. I don't know if you can hear him right now as I'm saying this, but like a neighbor comes knocking on the door, right after this moment, it's very sacred and they're wanting to, do you need me to mow your lawn or something like that? It's like guarding that room, that container from the everyday, right? Like helping time stop. I don't know. It's hard talking about this stuff that's like hard to put into words, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. But I really get what you mean. I think the particular image of standing next to the door, for whatever reason, that's really like helps me a lot understand what you're talking about. And it also makes me think about like shamans, people who host psychedelic ceremonies. Yeah, can sort of feel some of the commonalities of that sacred space holding.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was really nice to hear about the ritual that you mentioned for this process. I'm curious if there are any rituals that you really like doing with clients or like offering to them if they want to, like in the time leading up to the death when it's still a little bit further away.
Yeah. So, yeah. I love using music and using music as medicine, using music as portaling, right? Using music to change the vibration in the room, literally. Um, so one thing that I do, I've done often, I'll be doing it this Friday. That's tomorrow, Friday, 2 days. Is I love to create a playlist, about three to four songs. I create a playlist, and I love to guide my client, the person who is dying, and their main caregiver or whoever's there. I love to guide them through a relaxation meditation using that specific. And then I send the playlist to them and give them the homework of having, you can call it ritual or homework, or this sacred activity that they do, or at least once every other day they spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes in that music space that I created for them, also doing the relaxation that I taught them, which is essentially learning how to let go. So I give them that. And then when I come back again for another visit, we'll do the same meditation, even deeper, going deeper into letting go, deeper into relaxation. And then what happens is they'll do this exercise, this homework, this ritual over the course of the months or weeks. And then when death is imminent and that person is going to sleep and sleeping more than they're awake, or maybe waking up and having some anxiety or confusion, or the caregiver is stressed out, I advise them to turn on that same playlist that they have trained themselves to relax to. And they don't have to practice the meditation so much, but now the music is guiding them into a deeper state of relaxation. And then when active labor has begun, we use that same playlist. Like it's like sleep training into the great sleep. That is the one thing. I mean, you can come in with all these bells and whistles and think you're going to do this and do that as a death worker, and really at the end of the day, there's a lot of silence. In that space, there's a lot of quietness. There's a lot of just shared quiet, shared silence. And stimulating someone who's not feeling well is really kind of the last thing we want to do, right? Or giving a caregiver more tasks and more things. Now you've got to do this and do that. So I think just like coming in and being simple is my ritual.
I love that. I love the ritual that you're describing, the way that you talk about it, especially I think having the consistent music, the consistent playlist, it feels to me almost like you're constructing a room that they can they can go back into that room whenever they want.
I love that. I love that. Yes. And then Jane, like I've come into homes at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll pull the car up, tiptoe into the house. I'll come in, the lights are low. They've got that vigil candle going, and they've got that playlist going. And I don't have to be there for all that. The caregivers, like you're basically teaching them how to do it. And so it's just so special to like come in and be like, it worked. And mom is going to sleep on that playlist, and the caregivers are relaxed with that, because they've practiced with that specific set of music. And then all the way down to, I've been to a funeral where the music is played at the funeral. So just, yeah. And then you think, oh God, a year later, they can play that music and connect in to the spirit of their mother, sister, spouse.
I love that. And is the Is the guided meditation, you mentioned letting go. Is it sort of specifically about that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, it depends on, you gotta know the room, read the room, right? So I wouldn't come in and say, I'm going to teach you a meditation about letting go if you've got someone that's got a horrible death anxiety,
Yeah.
right? So I wouldn't necessarily use those words, but yeah, teaching them how to relax, how to soften the body, how to soften the attachment to thoughts, how to, yeah, how to get into the flow, how to let go. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of death midwives and death workers are really good at helping people fall asleep.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. It's all of the like almost like to me it's almost like there's a world of metaphor, like it's just like its own realm or something. And this whole conversation, it feels so alive to me as we're talking like the tea thing and all of the sleep aspect, and you know what I mean. It's like you can see all of these subtle and larger ways that some of these metaphors are playing out in your work, in your life. It's really cool.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you say
Maybe
Waldorf?
sorry.
Did you say Waldorf?
No.
Okay. I thought you said Waldorf.
What did I say that sounded like Waldorf?
I thought, okay.
No, I'm not sure what part of what I said would have sounded like that. Yeah. Um, yeah, maybe it's a good opportunity to talk a little bit about segue into your conceptual art, what that looks like for you, and then also how that plays out in your death work.
Yeah. So I think I'm first and foremost, I'm an artist. And always have my eye on the beauty. And that does not necessarily mean that my idea of beauty is always palatable. So even morbid things can be very beautiful to me. Decay can be very beautiful to me. So always with the eye on the beauty and the romance and everything. And art. I can't get enough of it. So my background, I have a degree in performance studies, and finished college in 2000, and found that I wasn't really so much drawn to being in the theater after several years away from it, and did other things, worked as a nanny and stuff, but found my way into performance art in Atlanta, and then understood that what I was doing as a performance artist was more like conceptual art, um, creating experiences for people that the experience is the piece that lives on, the idea that they received, or uh, is the piece, right? So my idea is the finished product. It doesn't necessarily matter like how it looks or where it goes, because it's going to disappear. Because it's a performance, it happens once or two times and then it's done. So there's not like you can go see it in a gallery. So yeah, so anyway, I really got into it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to get into conceptual art. It was more like I was like, oh, what I'm doing is conceptual art. And then wasn't very long ago, actually, that I realized that all of my death midwifery is basically one big, giant conceptual art piece. And then it's got these different branches of it. But, like even Instagram, this art to me that's like creating these memes and putting these cryptic messages out and these visuals. And I'm creating an experience for people there. And then the Nine Keys Death Midwifery Apprenticeship is the greatest art piece I will ever do in my life. And I could go on and on about that. But I've also really enjoyed creating experiences in large galleries here in Atlanta. I don't have a gallery space right now, but I did, and I really loved creating um, installations that were deaf education focused, deaf education experiences, where there, people are walking into a space where there's a death happening, or it's a grief expression space that also involves performance and ritual and costume. And so, gosh, I've got so many ideas. I have so many things that I want to do, that are conceptual art pieces using performance, but at the end of the day, it's a deaf education experience. Um, yeah.
Can you say a little more about what's that?
I don't even know what I just said.
Can you say a little more about how the performance might tie in with the death aspect? Like, for instance, you just mentioned there might be grief expression and then also like performance and costumes. Yeah, what could that look like?
Yeah, so do you want me to give you an example of something that
Yeah,
I've done?
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I had one piece that was called Death Bettering, and basically a huge gallery space, and I created the atmosphere to it where it felt like you were walking into an old Southern Gothic house in the 1940s, and it was hot, right? And it was just, the air was so thick with humidity, and it was just this like, it was beautiful, beautiful. And in the middle of the gallery was an old white wrought iron bed, and on the bed is a one of my actors or my players, who was a woman who was dying, and her sister was on the floor, um, going through all of these really old love letters that she had found that her sister who was dying had with a lover. So the audience was invited to come in and lay on the floor and read the letters to the, without word, but just guided through the actors, to come in and be around the person who was dying. And then at one point, the player dies, and then the midwives come in, without speaking so much, and hold the sister, and then help bathe and dress the body and lay her to rest. And then the audience members are given flowers to come lay on the body, and then they exit the gallery space. And that was incorporating, it was like a whole mood, a whole like visceral feeling of being in that space. People to this day can tell me they remember it very vividly, but also they're getting a chance to be up close with what dying at home can look like. So that's the trick up my sleeve, right? Is I'm leading you into this cool art experience, and then also I'm wanting to give you an idea and shift your perspective on what dying at home can look like. That was Death Bettering. And the other one that I did recently that was really cool and successful was something called The Collective Whale. And that was well into the pandemic. And again, the large gallery space, had altars set up. I had a player dressed as the Holy Mother of Death, um, sitting on a throne at the front of the room. The lights were red, everything was red. Audience comes in, no talking allowed. I lead them through movement, lead them through movement, and then I lead them through, tapping on each other's backs, to shake, so breaking up the grief, in the heart space. And then I start cussing God out, part performance, part me, and then the room erupted in less than 2 seconds, and people were wailing. So I'd say about 50 people in the room, in the gallery space, wailing, crying, hitting the wall, and then I shut the space back into a quiet place, brought everyone to lay back down, had some sound medicine, and then at the end, had them everyone stand in a big circle, and I had a big giant wooden needle and red thread, and I sewed everyone back together again as we sang row, row, row your boat. So then we put our voices together singing a song. Yeah. Thank you for letting me remember that, Jane. It was really, really beautiful. I'd do it again. So performance, set, costume, audience comes in, releases their grief, expresses their grief, has an experience of a communal grief wailing, um, and then we lift the energy by singing together.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing. Even just listening, I almost feel like I got to participate, and like I'm all about body-based therapy modalities, and it's so amazing to hear about how like full-bodied and full-beinged this sounds like it is for everybody participating. And like I'm very drawn to theater. I haven't stepped into that world yet, and I've heard from the guy who wrote The Body Keeps the Score that theater is actually one of the most effective ways of healing trauma, because your body can actually experience these other ways of being. And so I love that, you know, the audience, it sounds like the way that it's formatted, it's like the audience gets to step into theater or like improv or whatever, but without too much pressure, which can also be, you know, just make that a little bit harder, that spotlight. And yeah, just the emotionality of it, the sort of imaginal, metaphorical, and like full senses, the sensuousness of the experience. It sounds so powerful.
It was so powerful. I want to do more. Yeah. It's the space, finding the space is the challenging.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really just helping me get a better, fuller sense of what you mean when you talk about how we're not separate from our death work, or how, you know, the conceptual art and the death work are the same thing. Yeah.
Death midwifery is life.
Yeah, yeah. And I was gonna say the thing about like theater being good as a trauma healing modality, I could really see how participating in that sort of death ritual or death ceremony could really make you feel fully like, oh, I could do this when my loved one passes. I've done it now. You know, I've experienced it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, just like letting it soak in for a minute. Um, yeah, feeling into what direction I want to ask you, what direction I want to go next.
What are you feeling?
I think I want to ask you about the 9 Keys apprenticeship.
You're-
What'd you say?
I knew that's where you were going.
Yeah. I haven't interacted with you that much, but I have found you to be incredibly psychic in the times that we have interacted.
It's real fun trying to make friends like this.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Um, yeah, kind of whatever direction you want to go with it. If you want to talk about its conception, how it came to you,
I might cry.
great.
Yeah, Nine Keys is really, really special. Nine Keys is really special. So, you know, the backstory that I've told a million times is was teaching yoga in Atlanta, really large classes, 75, 80 students. Death midwifery grew out of that. And then was like, hey, where are the other death workers? Then Laura Barton, yoga teacher in Atlanta, a friend of mine. I trained her. I put together this program called the Death Midwifery Journey Course, trained Laura. Next thing I know, a guy named William Savage in New Orleans contacts me and says, hey, I heard about this thing you're doing. I want to do that. And then a woman named Janet Luck out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, same thing. So it kind of just, it just grew on its own. And it was people all over the place, you know, and some people on this part and some people on this part, and I didn't really know who was doing it. So after about 25 people studying that course, I closed the whole thing down, and said, you know what, I really want to make something where it's really intimate, where I really know these people, and where are they, and what is their specific death work, because no two death workers are alike, and that's the grand design of the whole thing. And so I didn't want to have a course where it was like, I'm going to churn out all these same death workers. So I wanted to really know who they were. And then also the Holy Mother of Death is guiding the whole dang thing. So I'm just following the guidance there. And, it turns into this 9 keys thing. I didn't name it 9 keys because of Hecate. It just literally was like, am I going to call it keys or gates? Keys or gates? And it was keys. And then people started coming. It's filled up every single time. I barely have to advertise it. I probably should advertise it more. I don't know. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. It fills up every time. It's still really small. It's what direction do you want me to talk about it in? Do you want me to talk about like
Well, it sounds like it's sort of about helping people come into their own personal version of death work. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of like 9 keys will take the actual apprentice and do with the apprentice what 9 keys wants to do with the apprentice. So sometimes some people will come into the course thinking, oh, I want to come into this course because I want to be a death doula. And next thing you know, the course has flipped them upside down. They've had their own ego death. They come out on the other side as someone who's more into like helping people with ego deaths and psychopumping, so it really will. 9 keys has its own relationship with each one of the apprentices. And yeah, it's a
Yeah.
mystery. I have to tell everybody that applies to it. They have to understand this is it's a mystical journey. This is magic will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that will really appeal to a certain type of person too, is like the invitation to step into the mystery.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's the core principles of 9 keys that anybody can read. They're on the website, but that death is the teacher. Death is the teacher. So the midwives that come through 9 keys, whether they identify as a worker, doula, or midwife, they understand that death is leading their work, and that they're going to be asked to let go over and over and over and over and over again in all different parts of their life, and also in death work. They're going to have to learn to let go of their death work, because it wants to take on its own agenda. So they get into alignment with the calling. And so basically I'm teaching them how to get into alignment with the calling, just by keep directing them back to it. I'm not saying you have to say this prayer and do this thing. I'm not doing that, but I keep moving the needle back over to stick with the calling, stick with the calling, stick with the ancestors, stick with the calling, right? You got to make your website. We're going to do all of those things. Learn about advanced directives. We're going to do all those things. But that's not what's going to build your work. What's going to build your work is that real strong connection that you have to the calling. And the more you master the art of letting go, the clearer that connection will become.
Yeah, amazing. I'm thinking about how, like, when I hear you talk about that, I feel a lot of relief. It's almost like normally I forget that in some ways, and I get stressed about all of the things that I have to figure out about it or something. You know what I mean? And when I hear you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, I can, like, it's almost more of a getting out of the way of it feeling, which is relieving for me. And then in practice, I find it to be, sometimes it can be this like intricate little dance between like, well, what is agency and what is surrendering? And yeah, what does surrendering mean in a big way, in a really tiny, subtle way? So I can really, what have I discovered?
What have you discovered?
I would say that like what surrendering felt like to me when I sort of started trying to lean into that was that it was a little bit more like collapse or something. That my version of surrender 1 second. I'm gonna help my dog get situated. I'll be right back.
I saw him eating the flower.
So my version of surrendering, I would say, like, or what I thought intuitively that meant was sort of like no action, or slowing down to the point of stopping. And that it's sort of been a journey of feeling into when surrendering means slowing down, when it means doing nothing, when it means taking action. It almost feels like learning to catch the flow in a really subtle way. And sometimes the flow is really fast paced and involves a lot of action. And it's like, I just have to catch it and go with it. Because I know in some deep level, oh, here's the action, do it, do it, do it. Yeah.
It's so nice to, I mean, this is how my besties talk. So like, it's so nice when you're like talking with someone who gets this, right? When you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. If it's in the flow, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. But I mean, I can say that, and then I'm also falling on my face with it all the time. You know what I mean? But it does, it feels a little, I love when it can feel pretty, like there's enough spaciousness in it that I can feel like it's a game and it's playful and I'm learning, and it's like, yeah, getting like smacked around a little bit sometimes is part of it. And that's part of the fun too.
Oh, but this is really what I want. But this is my desire.
Right, right, right.
That's where I get stuck. This is my desire. This is what I really want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Flow and surrender's like, you can just suffer.
Yeah, it's really interesting what, going back to when you first at the beginning of the conversation sort of talked about your relationship with Mother Death and the her being your boss. There's a way that I feel such a like devotion in that, like an ongoing devotion that feels really beautiful and powerful to me. And then I also wonder, like, do you ever have days where she asks you to do something or tells you to do something and you're like, no, I'm going a different way today. That doesn't feel right. And yeah.
You know, I feel I I used to. I think the older I've gotten, the more I've realized like that way is just gonna cause me suffering, you know, and it's usually gonna be more fun if I just do the other way, you know, like even if it sounds like a task that's gonna be really freaking daunting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, she's like, I need you to get with a financial coach and get all your finances in order. Blah, 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 blah. And you put it off and you put it off and you put it off and you put it off. And then finally you do it. I did it. Right. It was like kind of like, okay, I need someone to help me like be on this earth, right, with this money thing and these bills and life and stuff. And when I finally did that, because I kept hearing that, I kept hearing like this needs to get in order. All of this stuff needs to be organized. And I mean, honestly, I'd rather have a root canal than have to sit down and do all of that. And I finally did, and it ended up being with this woman who's this help. She's a helper, right? This financial coach person and advisor, whatever they're called. And she's wonderful, and it's wonderful, and she's gonna help me get all of these things and all my ducks in a row, and then, oh, I can make a dream true, you know, a dream come true because of her help, right? So I should have just listened the first time, you know, instead of like my nails about it for months.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm always feeling into that dance of like, how much am I just a vessel for what we could call something bigger coming through? And how much is it like, well, they know stuff, I know stuff, and you know what I mean?
I totally know.
It's really fun to hear your take on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you understand the vessel thing.
Yeah. I think in my journey, there's a way that I really needed and maybe still need to learn like a very deeply embodied sense of agency. And so when I started a really felt relationship with spirits that I think were there much longer than much earlier than I realized. But when that felt connection really started, sometimes it felt like I wanted more direction than I was getting. And that felt like a lesson of like, no, you figure it out. You decide, you do the thing.
Yes, there are those days too when they're like, put the damn tarot cards away. I'm not telling you anything. Yeah, I mean, there's days when I'm like, Ma, I really want to do death work. I really, and she's like, get lost. I don't want to talk about it. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
Um,
Fun
yeah.
being,
Fun being what?
fun being us little vessels and workers for God.
All in our own very unique ways, you know?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Feels like maybe we could do one more topic or question. How's that
Yeah.
sound?
Oh my goodness. That went by so fast.
It's been
Yeah.
fun.
I really liked that. It was good. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
there any other questions that you had?
this one is jumping out at me. What do you wish more people knew about you?
Hmm. That I'm really private. That just tickled me. No, there's a lot of things I wish people knew about me. There's a lot of things. Um, I really appreciate you asking that question. I think what's hot for me right now, something I'm thinking about a lot right now, is I wish more people knew that when they were in my actual physical company, not over Zoom or a call or something, that I actually prefer to be really quiet.
Hmm.
So I'd rather be quiet than make up conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few friends, like the besties, right, where we get loud and rowdy together. But for the most part, I wish more people knew that I'm absolutely comfortable being quiet, and I'd rather be quiet. Yeah,
Yeah, I relate to that. I relate to that a lot.
I do. Yeah, I love shared silence.
Me too. I think I learned that through my relationship with my dad because he and I sort of like naturally gravitated towards that while I was growing up. And it's like, oh, it's like great to like read a book in the same room as each other.
Yeah, yeah. Go for a walk, sit and eat in
Yeah.
silence, and yeah, yeah. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Narinder. Is there anything else like from what we've talked about so far or anything that's just present for you right now that you'd like to share?
There's a door wide open. There's a door wide open. There's love, expansion, healing, surrender, forgiveness. You just gotta turn and go through the door. Yeah, there's a door wide open right now. I think it's to go through these different phases in the collective, but right now it feels like there's a just big opportunity for expansion, and that does not spiritually bypass at all people sleeping on the streets and children being hungry. But we can be in a place of love and expansion and beauty and hold that reality too. So there's a door open right now. Yeah. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you so much, Narinder. It's just been such a beautiful conversation on my end and like yeah, I'll just bring this up again. Like as a very somatic person, I don't get to have conversations very often where I feel like I can just feel the conversation through my whole body the whole time, you know, and this whole conversation has been like hitting those depths. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your time and energy. And yeah, what a beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. And I'll see you around.
Great.